This is Dana Seeger from the School of Visual Philosophy. Today I'm going to show you how to create foam block prints. Block printing is a method of relief printing, meaning that you carve away the areas that you don't want the image to be, and then you put ink on the surface, which is raised up, and print that onto a card or a piece of paper, and whatever you have left on the surface level will print. It's also a mirror image, so you have to think about whatever image you're going to use is going to be the opposite. So it's going to be a mirror image, like looking in a mirror. So if you had text, for instance, you would want to make sure that you wrote your name backwards. So some of the supplies that we will need are the foam blocks, and these are just styrofoam, very thin styrofoam. And you can even find them on like cheap meat trays. Those work really well. I got these from Amazon. They're made by Melissa and Doug, specifically for foam printing. And you'll need a pencil or something to transfer your drawing to the block, and also to create your grooves in the block. A ballpoint pen works really well for this purpose too. You will need something to squeeze out your ink when you're ready to print. I'm using a glass palette, but you can also use a paper plate or even newspaper or wax paper, something that you can just squeeze out some ink and then use a brush, a foam brush, to then apply the ink to your block. Today I'm using some acrylic paint, which is pretty easy to come by. You can get this at an art store or like Michael's. You can get it on Amazon.com. It's really easy. It's water soluble, so it cleans up with soap and water. Really easy to use. You could also use block printing ink, which is made by a variety of companies. But if you're just going to do this one project, you can use the paint that you have. And that's going to be really good. So the first thing that we're going to do is choose which image we're going to use, and I'm going to use this light bulb right here. So I'm going to cut out that shape from my little motif sampler. And if it's not the size that you want, you can always use a blank piece of paper and resize it with the pencil and draw it the size of your block, or you can just freehand a drawing, that's fine too. So I'm going to position it where I want it on my block, like so. And then I'm going to use my pencil to lightly trace, and you'll see that it makes an impression or an indentation in the block. Because it's just styrofoam, it's really easy to push down and make that line. Some of these we'll use as guidelines, others we will use as the actual lines that will stay white in our print. I'm pushing hard enough to make an impression, but not so hard that I'm going to tear my paper. And I like to use a ballpoint pen for this as well, because the ballpoint kind of rolls along the surface and won't tear your paper no matter how hard you push. Okay, one more. The best kinds of images for this process are very simple, sort of stylized images like this light bulb. Blocky kind of images work well too, more solid images. You just have to remember that whatever you push down into the block is going to stay white. So if I wanted this circle to stay white, I would have to either cut it out or push down that whole area so my ink wouldn't come in contact with that. So now that I have a guideline, I'm going to use, you don't really need to use a pen, you can use anything that will make an impression. So I can use even the tip of this pen lid and push down. So If I push down lightly, I'm gonna leave a very shallow mark, and that will be a thin line. If I push down, so I'll leave those alone. If I push down really heavily or with a wide instrument, I'm going to leave a thicker impression and make a wider line. If I want to add a couple extra lines over here, I can do that. And I'm almost done. You can always take more away, so you don't have to be afraid if you feel like I want to remove some of this area or the background at a later time. I can always use my scissors to cut the shapes out. I can also remove more by pressing down even after I make an initial print, but you can't get back the surface. So once you make an impression, it's there to stay. So now that I have my little image, what I'm going to do is squirt out some ink onto my palette. And like I said, you can use a paper plate or something that you can throw away. And then I'm going to use my foam brush. Traditional printmakers for block printing would use a brayer, which is just a roller, and it rolls the ink on. The brayer looks like this, and you roll the ink onto the surface, and this ensures that only the areas that are raised up will get inked. But those are kind of expensive, and so I'm going to show you how to use your foam brush and just dab. You don't want a whole lot of the acrylic on your brush, because if you have too much, then it can go down into the grooves where you don't want the ink to stay. I'm going to start at the outside, and I'm just going to work my way in. If I dab, then I leave a lot more of the ink or the acrylic paint on the surface. If I sweep it like this, then I'm actually scraping some of the ink off. I'm just dabbing. You can see in the deeper grooves, it's leaving a lot of that ink alone. Not getting in those parts. Turn it on the next side. Kind of going back and soaking up some of the excess over here. Like I said, if you have too much, then it's not going to allow those indentations to show through. Because this is a hand-pulled print, you're going to see some variation in between each one, which is kind of fun. You can choose to leave some parts uninked if you wanted, say, a slightly lighter area over here. You can even use a paper towel and wipe some up before you print it. And I'm going to move my palette out of the way. I'm going to put my block down. And then I'm going to use this card. I'm going to open up the card, and you can either put your paper that you're printing on face down over your block, or you can put your block, put my paper down so I don't get it dirty. Or if your block, like mine, is smaller than your paper, it might be easier to place it so that you can see where the borders are. And then I'm just going to press down firmly. I'm not going to shift it at all, because if you start to move it, then it will not give you a clear impression. And what we're doing is just transferring the ink from the block onto the card. Peel it back and then see what kind of impression we have. And there we go. So each time you can keep layering up your color. I just add a little bit more ink or paint and start dabbing again, and then move on to another card and just keep repeating. The nice thing about printmaking is once you have your block, you can make multiple prints or copies of the same image. And like I said, if you choose to do some variations, say I wanted to cut out the background of one of them, once I did that, then I would be stuck with that singular image. But you know, play around, have fun, wash it off and try another color or blend colors. It's up to you how you want your finished print to look. There's lots of possibilities, lots of room for play, so go have fun and play.